technical skills, they're hard, right? They're not always the easiest. And if you do things really well, right, it can be difficult too. But the nature of our industry is that tools are changing. Even Splunk, 10 years ago, 5 years ago is different than what Splunk is going to be in 5 years from the future. So as kind of this space is constantly evolving and there's new types of technology, even if you're perfect at every tool, right, in the cyberspace right now, your ability to learn is more important because all of that can be obsolete in 10 years.
All right, welcome everybody. This is the last session for this year for the ECA panel interviews. My name is Kenneth Ellington, and our esteemed guest today is Mrs. Grace Chi from PulseDive. How are you doing today, Grace?
Very good. A little sleepy, a little jet lagged from some travel last week, but really good.
Awesome. Love to hear it. So tell us a little bit more about what you do, Grace, and who you are.
Yeah, of course. So my name is Grace, as Kenneth mentioned. I'm the co-founder and the COO of PulseDive, which is a threat intelligence startup. We're focused on frictionless threat intelligence solutions for growing teams. And so that means supporting threat intelligence, workflows, research, enrichment, and automation at kind of all parts of the threat intelligence cycle. All of that is to support or improving business outcomes, right, for whatever organization you work for.
And how exactly did we meet, Grace? How was it been 3 years, I think, now?
It might 3 or 4 years even. So correct me if I'm wrong, because my memory may be inaccurate. I put out an ask every year to do open networking where I'm just like, hey, anyone who just, no pitches, no sales, no scams, but if you want to just talk one-on-one as two professionals in whatever space you're working at, sharing trials, challenges, successes, whatever you want, picking each other's brain, come talk to me. And during that phase, I don't know, Kenneth, if you reached out to me or we were connected and I reached out to you because I thought your position was interesting at the time, but we kind of had a very organic kind of LinkedIn conversation, found out we had a lot of things in common and ways we could help each other, had a lot of side projects we were working on too, and startups and security experiences that were aligned, and really took it from there. Kenneth, do you remember anything specifically from our first encounters?
Yeah, I think Ken told me to reach out towards you. He's like, you should be on our show. I'm like, oh,
Ken
really?
Underhill?
Yeah, Ken Underhill.
Remember that.
And I was like, I had no idea who this lady even is, but she seemed pretty cool. So let me reach out towards her. I think I was in Dallas. I think I just moved to Dallas. So I know it's still like during like the middle part of COVID. And yeah, it was very organic. I got along with you very well naturally. I didn't have to force anything. And I'm like, this lady's really cool. I like her. And so we kept we kept in touch throughout that entire year. And then when the time came for me to start my own business, I'm like, shoot, I have no idea what the hell I'm doing. Let me talk to somebody that actually knows what they're doing. And that's why I reached back out towards you.
Arguably, I'm still figuring out what I'm doing, but I do think that especially during COVID, it was so hard to connect with people, and we were all still learning like what webinars were and what connecting online was. But in the security space, because everything is so can be so international and so always on, having just resources and people who are good at things that are different than what you're good at has compounding returns over time. So I'm glad I was able to help you.
Yeah, so for those who don't know, Grace is one of my advisors, right? So all the site designs for ECA, that's all her. I'm terrible at that. I can barely use Canva. I'm really stupid when it comes to that. So that's all her. That's all her creation. Until she's like the best in business at it.
My past life had a little bit of design and marketing, and I still practice art in my spare time. So visual communication is something that I spent a lot of time learning how to do, and I still really enjoy. So even though it sounds like work, it's very much so feels like a hobby or feels like something fun and refreshing after a long day working on the startup. So I'm glad I can support you there as well. And of course, it's only good when the content and the purpose of the business is good. So glad it was aligned there.
Yeah, I can't even draw a circle properly. So I'm like, let's ask Grace. It took me hours to like build some of the stuff out. I'm like, screw it, let's pay Grace to do it. It's a lot
I
better.
remember sometimes you'll ask me like, how do you align this thing? I'm like, hold my beer. Like, just give me the link. I'll deal with it for you. I used to do it all the time for my main job. So happy to like share the wisdom about how to get some branding, how to get some, marketing basics out there for anybody in the security space, because personal branding is so important in this industry as well.
It definitely is. So, Grace, you have a unique background for how you got inside of cybersecurity. You didn't have the traditional path, right? So, can you tell me a little bit more about that?
Yeah, it's fun because so many people that I talk to are like, I don't have a traditional path. And of course, there's the IT traditional path and the security traditional path now, and there's more security degrees. But when half of the industry says that they don't have a traditional path, like maybe that is the traditional path. Maybe coming from all different backgrounds is what it's needed to, right, fill the talent gap. When I was in school, I went really liberal arts, really academic. I studied art history and behavioral neuroscience. So I'd be looking at rat brains and I would be looking at really, really old books with really, really old artists. But I knew that I liked business and I liked like working with a professional career versus academic. And so when I first graduated, I actually did something that was like very, safe and easy. I went for like the equivalent of like the business job. So I did marketing. But over time, I learned that I wanted to and really fell in love with the idea of like challenging the business to find out what really was working, what wasn't working, what did we have to develop. I really liked working with different teams as well, not just a marketing team, not just leadership, not just engineering, not just finance, but bringing that all together. And so from moving into like, being a baby marketer to a product marketer, I was able to see that I was taking on more and more roles and wearing more hats at smaller and smaller teams. And I was like, maybe it does make sense to kind of go for it on my own and be fully accountable, right, in even smaller team and not have to just be responsible for marketing outcomes.
Okay, so from there, what prompted you to go inside cybersecurity startup for your own business? How'd that journey start for you?
Yeah, the startup piece or the cyber piece was an accident. I didn't think, from the industry growth standpoint, cybersecurity is a great place. There was no logic like that. I spent a lot of time working in more legacy industries, more established industries like architecture, engineering, like the building kind, and supply chain. And I just happened to have a coincidence in which an executive that I knew was angel investing into cybersecurity companies. Even though it wasn't part of my main job, they kind of brought me in with this Israeli MDR company back when MDR was a new kind of phrase. And then I was able to learn through the product marketing role, like what is cyber, what is managed detection, what is response, what is threat intelligence, and get exposure to this like world in which I really was not familiar at all, and was like, I like these people, I like this space. And from there, I built some networks and connections. And I found my current founder of PulseDive. We were having conversations. And from there, it was just a very natural, like the team was starting to grow for PulseDive. It was going from an MVP into version one, version two, and needed kind of additional support to help really foster that growth. And that's when I joined in.
That's really awesome. So I guess this is something we tell our students as well, right? Someone saw your passion, energy, right? They want to help you out, bring you into a different space you weren't familiar with, and you took advantage of that, right? One of the biggest things I've always thought about, right? I've been taught, right? Everyone has their chances in life, but everyone takes advantage of those chances, right? You're a living proof that if you're able to take advantage of those chances, you can go pretty far. So
Yeah.
kudos to you, Grace.
Thanks. And, I was just talking to one of my mentees today who is very talented, had pivoted in a career, spent about a year or two in like analyst security research work, was having a really hard time finding a job, right? The market is not the best right now. And they get really far in a bunch of interviews and then it just doesn't pan out. They're not senior enough because a lot of people want super senior opportunities, but they've spent time building up their network. And funny enough, I was talking to her and she was like, actually, I have people coming to me asking if I can consult with them. I have vendors coming to me asking if I can help them build out some content based on like threat research and analysis. Oh, I have some friends who have small businesses who need help translating, right? Very confusing lingo about something that happened with their business that's not super cyber jargony, but in like a regular layman's term. And so, that is an opportunity where she was like, what do you think? I'm like, that's amazing. That means you have established yourself. And this is an opportunity being given to you that is so unique and that you don't have to compete with everyone else for. And so when you're at that crossroads of a good opportunity that you might not have accepted and being prepared and knowing what you're doing with it, that's where magic happens. And that's where you can really spearhead a career much faster than the traditional path.
Yeah, especially in the job market. The job market isn't the best. I remember when I was looking for a job, what was this? 2 years ago, technically. It was, you wanted a job in cybersecurity, they're going to hire you. It was insanely easy to get a job. I remember I interviewed with Infosys, and from like start to finish, from when I applied, they gave me an offer like in 2 to 3 days. And the final interview was like, it was with the managing partner, right? The guy that makes like 7 figures a year. And the minute I logged in, he's like, Kenneth, he's like, don't worry, you already have that job. I literally just want to talk to you. It's like, oh, I'm like, okay. He told me the salary straight up, how much I'd be making. It's like double what I'll be making. So compared that to now, where it's a lot harder. So we tell our students to try to get creative for what you can do, right? Talk to local businesses, right? Get on podcasts, go to different conferences, right? Just don't do what everyone else is doing, right? If you really want it, talk to us. We can help you try to get towards those end goals.
Right. Find communities of like-minded people, but also if you volunteer at events, that gives you exposure in a really authentic way, not like, hi, this is me, I'm looking for a job. A really authentic way of helping out, giving to the community and getting connected with interesting people, definitely. And I think a couple years ago, if you had 1 year of experience, you were a super senior specialist, right? And everyone was hiring for them. But the reality of the market now is that people are cutting back. So you have to make sure you're able to justify your role, justify whatever you're contributing to the security team, and also talk about your experiences in a way that talks about the business context for what you do.
Absolutely. So for part two of this, Grace, for those of people that don't know, like what exactly is threat intelligence? Could we use that phrase a couple of times?
Threat intelligence, so it's interesting because it's complex. There's the really technical and tactical side of things where you could sit in the dark in a lab coding on your computer all day, right? And then there's the very strategic side of things. At the end of the day, like cyber threat intelligence is all about taking data, right? Real information that is then contextualized, that informs action related to cyber threats, related to threats in the cybersecurity space. So the other thing that I just presented on too is when we take it to the next level of cyber threats, people often think about like APTs or specific strains of ransomware. It's really whatever your organization may face that has a negative business outcome. Right. And so threats and cyber threats is about risk management and informing risk-based decision making. So I think that there's a lot of like, ooh, like, spooky, so cool, investigative and military intelligence. But at the end of the day, it's what does the business need to know and care about? Where are we exposed to threats? Where can we reduce the opportunity of threat actors successfully, right? Creating negative impacts, and what can we do to mitigate that?
So how did you learn about all of this, Grace? This sounds really complicated.
So I will say, and I'm very transparent about this, if you have questions about specific APT groups or about specific tactics, techniques, and procedures, about specific types of malware, I will find someone who's infinitely smarter than me about that, who's doing that on the job. Threat intel as a field is so wide. It comes from everything from like commodity, just like phishing and business email compromise to, persistent, sophisticated like espionage attempts and campaigns. There's anyone in the world. There are different people who are good at different things. For me, I learn the basics. I know just enough to be dangerous, and I know enough people who are smarter than me who can answer real questions when they come up. But when I joined with PulseDive and I was really just a noob, total noob in the cyberspace, I gave myself a boot camp where I spent a month where I think I spent maybe 20 to 30 hours a week just learning. I didn't know what any acronym meant at the time. I didn't know what any initialism meant. I read all the newsletters. I took the, Cisco 101 classes. I followed all the researchers that I thought were doing something interesting in the space. And since then, I've become familiar with the space and the terms. But at the end of the day, like this field is so large that I would never, ever, ever claim that I'm good at any of it, right? I don't know if you feel the same way, Kenneth.
I would say probably the same thing. I don't consider myself a genius in any aspect for what I do, right? I just know how to find stuff pretty quickly, which is what being a good architect really is, honestly. I don't memorize like lines of code or commands I need to use for the command line. Because to me, that's wasting my brain cells. I can just copy and paste that down. I'm not going to waste my time memorizing that. So literally, it's just like you said, being connected, knowing where to look and who to talk to, just having those resources handy when you actually need them, which I think people don't fully realize. That's a lot of what cybersecurity and software engineering are. I guess everyone thinks we all have it memorized, but I tell my students, I pull up my OneNote, I'm like, this is how I type the command so fast. I've been done this 100 times. So I can copy and paste it down. Yeah.
Having the right processes, right? So like one, of course, knowing the right specialist when you need to, but also like knowing how to ask the right questions and think critically about the problem set. Because I think a lot of security practitioners too, they see the project or the problem from a very narrow lens without understanding like, okay, once I solve this problem, once I have an answer, how do I communicate it so that the people around me, so that the business can take the right actions? How do I sell in the idea that we need this security tool, or that I found these things that we need to mitigate through this way? Like a lot of it is more than just the work that people have traditionally thought security was, which is really important too. But then also having processes so that it's more efficient every time around, right? Like security as a program is extremely iterative and you're constantly optimizing. And with tools changing and threat landscapes changing, it's never static, right? It's always dynamic. So how do you stay afloat of that, and how do you prioritize without feeling like you're drinking from the fire hose 24/7?
Yeah, it's really interesting because like when I started out, I didn't know what I was doing. I mean, like in security in general, right? I felt really stupid. I had like big imposter syndrome. I'm like, they shouldn't have hired me. I'm like, I'm a fraud. I shouldn't be here. Why am I even here? It took me like 4 years to get over that. It wasn't until I got towards like my current consulting job where every 3 to 4 months I get thrown to a different client and I have no idea what's going on. You have to kind of figure it out. That's when I realized that hey, nobody knows what they're doing at all. We're all just trying to do the best that we can. And then you feel a lot better. It would be like simple stuff that I would do. And my client's like, oh my God, you're a genius. I'm like, this is basic stuff. But then I had to realize that like my common knowledge isn't common towards everyone, right? And so there's power inside of that and realizing that it's a way to get over that imposter syndrome and realize you do know something, right? You can't help somebody out. A lot of times the students won't understand that they may not have direct cybersecurity experience, but they do have experience, right? Because they've been alive, right? And if you survive this long, it means you've done something right. So this overall life experience, right, and whatever job you may have, you can be an engineer, a pilot, mechanic, whatever the case may be.
Yeah.
And taking those skills from that area and bring them to cybersecurity is super beneficial.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Being able to translate skills. I think that's something that I learned very early on in my life too, because I would study art history, which people are like, yeah, you want fries with that? Because like, what career you can have in art history? It's true. People joked about it, but it taught a lot about thinking about arguments and understanding the relationship between the artist and who is paying for it, and what propaganda or what intent they had with the audience and the society at the time. So you're thinking like at a high level, like a meta level about these relationships. And then I would be looking at, brains, and I would be doing like ANOVA, multi-factor, I don't even remember what's a variable like analysis. I was using like MATLAB and SPSS, like all these tools that I could not even figure out these days. But, taking really like rigorous scientific approaches, and both of those sides of my life and my thinking, it impacted my understanding about how things can get done. And I think a lot of people might be like, oh, I want to be a pen tester. Oh, I want to be a security operations center analyst. But, oh, I only do emergency dispatch. Oh, I've only done nursing. And I'm like, all of these skills, prioritization, time management, working under pressure, being a good project manager, being able to communicate clearly and translate very complex ideas and issues into simple language. Those are all skills. And you kind of just need to layer on some additional training and some additional knowledge that is more domain specific. But do not ever forget those core skills you've already built up that set you far apart from a lot of other people who may not have that experience.
Yeah, it's my opinion, those other skills are the hardest to teach, right? And hardest to gain. I always tell people, right, I can teach you anything on Splunk, XOR, Palo Alto, or the case may be. I can't teach you not to be an a-hole in front of a client, right? You either want to be there or you don't want to be there, right? There's a lot of people that don't have the people skills whatsoever. You probably know who they are as well, Grace, from your job, right? If people you talk to, you're like, people are just an a-hole. I'm like, I don't want to be around them. I don't want to work with them. I don't want to talk with them, right? It doesn't matter how technically smart they are, right? It doesn't really matter if nobody wants to work with you or give you a business deal. So if you have those soft skills, you know how to talk to people, you know how to communicate, you know how to actually manage your project properly and keep people calm, those are super beneficial.
Yeah, and I would say as well, like with technical skills, they're hard, right? They're not always the easiest. And if you do things really well, right, it can be difficult too. But the nature of our industry is that tools are changing. Even Splunk, 10 years ago, 5 years ago is different than what Splunk is going to be in 5 years from the future. So as kind of this space is constantly evolving and there's new types of technology, even if you're perfect at every tool, right, in the cyberspace right now, your ability to learn is more important because all of that can be obsolete in 10 years. So that concept of knowing how to stay on top of things, how to teach yourself how to learn is a really critical skill set. And also figuring out how you learn, right? And how to maximize and hack your own brain to learn more effectively and give yourself that like productive environment for learning and performing is going to give you that longer term success versus burnout in 2 years because you're maybe looking at tickets in a security analyst role and don't know how to get out of it and you're really tired because all you're doing is working the graveyard shift. I think that being able to think about like your personal success at that level will make you much more sustainable, right? Help you build your career slowly but surely over time.
Absolutely. So my next question based off of that, what exactly do you do for a CEO, Grace? And like what's your favorite part of being that? What's the part you hate most about being a CEO for your company?
With a startup, and in some ways we've been around for a while, but in some days we're still early because we are bootstrapped. We've been able to self-fund ourselves to this point, which I'm proud of personally. The titles don't mean anything. Some people are like, oh, co-founder, oh, COO. I'm like, what is it doesn't mean anything. Some people like to see it, right? But what I really like is that it's never the same. I used to always get bored at jobs when it was just the same project. They wanted the same thing from you. If you wanted to improve your process or change how things were done for the better, maybe you'd get pushback because that's not your role. And so, what I've really enjoyed the last, 4 years, 4+ years, is that every quarter, every year, it's a completely different company in some ways. All of the values are still there, and all of that, like community participation and my ability to give back and be very values driven has stayed, but like the things that I do day to day are different. I might be writing compliance policies. I might be figuring out how to onboard a new accounting tool. I might be doing user research with a bunch of our friends and users. I might be doing a redesign of the platform. I might be tracking and doing demos and trying to make sure our sales process makes a lot of sense and is a good experience for our prospects who come to us. So, like, all of that is very different every single month. There's a few recurring kind of projects, obviously, that I'm responsible for, and that's related to anything making sure the business is just running. But those kind of scaling, those kind of like stretching ourselves and the diversity of those projects is what keeps me, excited every day.
That sounds super interesting. Yeah, I can probably say the same thing, right? My title may sound fancy, but I kind of have to do everything at this point. As we gotten bigger, I've been able to hire more people to take away some of the more, not mundane, but like more admin tasks, right? Just for managing the business and making sure everything's up and running. So I can focus on the core competencies of our other aspects of the business where those tasks are like tasks that only I'm able to do, right? And that's where I can really shine. It's hard sometimes with fires catch, right? You have to put them out. So just trying to manage it as best as possible. It's one of the biggest things I've learned. In fact, I felt bad for you, Grace. Like the first 3 months of her business, I pinged you all the time. I'm like, just gonna slap me across the face.
Never, never, never.
I literally didn't know what I was doing. I'm like, I feel so bad. I'm like, it's like 1 o'clock. I'm texting Grace. I'm like, I probably don't know what to do.
And I'm answering you because I'm awake at 1 o'clock too doing work. So
Oh God. It was just yeah. It's funny because people told me like running a business is gonna be a hard path. I'm like, oh yeah, of course. Like no crap, right? It's a business. It's not until you actually do it, you're like, wow, like I don't know what's going on at all. Like it's every day, right?
every day you're making choices, right? You have to make choices on where you're investing your time and effort. And if you put it in the wrong place, it might be a distraction. If you get lucky, you have to react really quickly. And so I think that people are surprised when I'm like, I'm probably at the most peace in my life now than I've ever been, even at a stable, 9 to 5 job. But it's because I enjoy having that accountability. If something goes terribly wrong, that's okay. At least I made those choices. I think what drives me nuts and what used to drive me nuts is when things would be going badly and I would see ways that I would want to fix it, but I didn't have the agency to do that. And so that would give me more anxiety because I get frustrated. So I think that it's stressful. You never really know if you're doing the right thing. And over time, you kind of build this like intuition and you at least build this, I don't want to say resilience, but this like comfort making these choices and just trying your best. But you also come to a point where you're like, I can't do everything. So I need to just pick the few things I'm going to do really well, pick the thing I want to get done this week, pick, the partners that I really want to work with and just make it happen. And the good thing is in security, there are so many good people, for us, there's reseller partners, there's users, and there's contributors, there's, other vendors that we just, other friends and founders that we can rely on. And that makes things a lot more much of a community and less like lonely, just sitting by yourself being like, am I doing the right thing? Am I doing the wrong thing? Am I going to go out of business in a year?
Yeah, Ed, for sure. You made it a lot more enjoyable for sure, Grace.
Thank you.
Um, I didn't feel like I was all alone, even though some days I did, because I'm like, I still know what I'm doing. That's one of the biggest lessons, right? It's just to learn how to outsource your time, right? For things that aren't permanent towards the business being really successful, but still the business running. That, and I would say probably learn on what actually to invest your money in initially was another big thing. Because for us, I guess it was probably the site, right? That was the biggest thing, right? Right? Like how much money they want to spend on making the site how fancy. And people always tell me, they're like, man, this site looks amazing, Kenneth. I'm like, really? I'm like, I haven't changed it like in a year and a half. So awesome
I
job on you,
yeah.
Grace.
I do think too, like, because the cyber vendor space, there's so much VC money, it's so like, perceived as high tech, that a lot of startups, whether or not they have the finances, they're like, we have to have a super sleek site. It has to be like shiny. We have to have custom graphics. And my mindset coming from a bootstrap company is like, what do we need to do? How can we do it well? And do we really need to spend, $100,000 on a website? Do we really need to go with, let's say, a huge booth at some of those big events? Or can we, it's like a hacker mentality, like how far can we get not spending that money? What is the most efficient use of my time, energy, money, financial resources that can still get great positive outcome? And so a lot of how we've run PulseDive when it comes to marketing and sales is heavily inbound, is heavily organic. We don't really sponsor things, and we spend more time, like I've spent more time, even though I'm responsible, I guess, for marketing stuff, doing research for CTI in a different way, and then giving that to the community as like my contribution versus like pitching stuff, which like I think that our users appreciate a lot more. And so it's still building brand awareness, but it is something I genuinely enjoy doing that brings value and feels very authentic to who we are and what we want to be contributing. And the research I was talking about is one that I'm doing again, which is the Threat Intelligence Networking Survey. So this is not vendor driven. The results are fully public. And I basically go and ask the threat intelligence community, who, like, what methods do you do to share information, to learn about threat intelligence data? What channels are you using? What's given you success? How much time do you spend? How are your feelings about it? So that we can really like pull back the curtains and realize that not everything is this beautiful, automated, tech-driven, sexy AI, process. And so much of this is still happening because two people are talking to each other because something came up. And so, like, for me, it's important because that type of research is valuable and it's actionable and it helps inform how people can do better at their jobs, but it's not necessarily like monetizable, which is why no one's really asking these questions. So that's where I can bring in my liberal arts background and contribute to the space in a way that I know I'm good at, that helps obviously with our brand and what we bring, but doesn't feel like that kind of transactional marketing. And it's fun and it has results and it's good for the company.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Then to piggyback off of that, to bring it back, I guess, towards me, right? Because this is technically my show.
It's all about you.
So why exactly did you choose to help and work with us, Grace? You're a very busy person. You're pretty awesome. You can do anything that you want to do. So why do you waste your time with me so much?
Waste your time? Definitely not. So I'm a big believer that when things feel right and they're exciting and interesting, it is okay if it's not the most profitable thing. It is okay if you don't see that big reward in the traditional sense of like glamour, power, fame, whatever, money. And I do think working with smaller teams, companies, and efforts that have good vision, that are making a positive impact in the security space, that's something I always have time for, right? That's why I take on different mentees and talk to them during the month to help them get their job or build their career or help their soft skills. That's also why I worked with you, Kenneth, because I think that you bring a very unique voice to the space. You're able to help shortcut a lot of noise and pain and suffering of trying to get a career started in security for a lot of people who are interested but may not have the full resource stack or may get frankly like lost in all the junk that's out there. And when you first started, I was like, this is cool. I'm happy to help you. I have some skills that are useful for you from day one. But then as I was able to see some of your earliest students getting jobs at places that I would love a job at, like great companies, great positions, I was like, wow, this is really making an impact. And I don't know if you know this, Kenneth, but I met one of your first students at Black Hat and DEF CON this year.
Oh,
And so we
Courtney,
were able to, yeah, we were able to talk about you a little bit.
that's awesome.
Yeah.
I hope she said nice things about me.
It's only good stuff. But yeah, it's like seeing the results of this kind of like, for me, for you, it was really stressful. For me, it was like this fun, like not quite volunteer, but like this thing, like I can help you. This will make sense. I'm happy to give you some advice because I have this knowledge. And then seeing like this helped someone build their career and get this job and they're doing this over and over again. That to me is successful value.
Stressful is an understatement. God,
It was fun for me the whole time. It was stressful for you.
yeah, it's been like one of the biggest blessings in my life to be able to do this, right? I get to help people that look like me, like people that look like me inside cybersecurity, get jobs that will help change their trajectory of their lives and their future kids' life, right, and their family's lives. So to me, that means everything, right? Because I didn't have those opportunities when I initially got inside cybersecurity, so I really had to bust my ass to try to get that and build those networks and connections. There are so many pitfalls that I go down. I had to pick myself out of, right? So I kept seeing people online get inside these issues, right? And I'm like, hey, I can actually shorten the path for them, right? I can tell them where all the roadblocks are, where all the potholes are, so they're able to avoid it. And they don't have to go to a big university and pay $80,000 for a 4 year degree or master's degree program, right? So for me, it was a no-brainer to start it. Even though initially I never wanted to be a business owner, I thought it'd be a terrible idea. There's some days where I still do think that, right? But those days are getting less and less as we move on. So yeah, it's just been a really, really incredible journey. And I'm really thankful I got to meet someone awesome like you, Grace.
Apparently you have to thank Ken because he made a comment or something on one of my posts that made you connect with me. But yeah, I mean, I think my other idea too is that I love when people have passions and maybe they have a job, right? Maybe you have a traditional job, but you have something else you want to work on. That's very security. So many threat researchers are doing their work, but then also have their own blogs or their own research or their own volunteer efforts. And that's always something that I want to support because that's like the other side where you're able to really shine and just take it and run with it and make the most of it, so long as it doesn't stress you out and burn you out.
I was a little bit of both initially when I first started. I mean, it's in a startup, right? It's unavoidable sometimes, but it's gotten a lot better, especially over the past, I'd say, 3 months as we really started to gain more students and get people more hired as well. So just like overall awesome experience. I guess my next question from that before we go over the panel session. How do you feel, I guess, about the overall landscape of cybersecurity training? How do you feel about, per se, quote unquote, boot camp programs?
So the world of cyber is a hot mess on all fronts. Okay. So when it comes to vendors, there's all sorts of vendors saying all sorts of things. There's new types of tools coming in. When it comes to training and education, it's the same as well. There's people charging big dollars for maybe things that are good. There's a bunch of free tools that are really amazing too. And so I think the key takeaway is to really, if you're a student, if you're looking for support and potentially a boot camp or just some sort of way to elevate your career, is to one, feel like if you join a boot camp or a masterclass, that's the right community. You don't want to get sold and feel like this coach who says they're going to do work with you kind of disappears after the first sales call ends or anything like that. And then can they get you the type of experience, like are they empathetic as to where you are, and is that tailored to where you want to be going as well? So I think that there's a lot of different resources out there and there's good and bad on both ends. But if using your critical thinking skills, this investment, whatever amount that is, can get you faster to the goal that you want without being too good to be true, like understanding you do need to put in the work. It will be difficult, but these skills and these resources, this network and these kind of boosts, right? Whatever trainings you're taking can help you answer a lot of the questions and the unknown unknowns and the known unknowns that you have, then it could be worth it. Right. So my answer, not to be a CTI person, but it really depends. But there's good and bad across every resource out there. And it's really hard to kind of filter through the noise. So anywhere where you have warm referrals from people if you're in communities, right, trusted communities of people you like, and you're hearing good things. And if you also are at the point in which you've hit a wall with free opportunities and free resources, and you know where you want to go, but you need help to get there, that's where a boot camp can really help out.
I agree, right? The way I've always looked at it is like an investment, right? As invest inside a stock or inside a home, right? What will be my return on investment and how long will it take to get that investment back? Because as I've gotten older, and this is like general life advice or wisdom, I guess, people are willing to sacrifice the time and money for things they really want, right? Your kids want to go to Disney World, you'll work 2 jobs for 6 months to save up for that to take your kids to Disney World. You want
That's
a new
one day's
BM?
ticket, right?
I should know. I lived in Tampa. I was like 40 miles away from Disney World. You want to buy a new BMW for yourself, you'll rationalize spending $80,000 on it, getting a turbocharged, the heated seats, even though you live in Florida, the new chrome rims, right? You'll justify that and make up some logic to make that happen, right? But people will invest and spend the time and money on the things they really care about. So for you, it's just making sure that investment is worth that time and money. And if it is, and you trust it, then make that choice for yourself. Because the worst thing I hated was, or me that ate at me, was that I knew I was better than my current position when I went back at public supermarkets, frying chicken and making sandwiches, getting threatened over a cold sandwich. The people are crazy. It's like $5, but whatever. And for me, like every day I was there was a day that I wasn't doing the career that I wanted to do, and that ate me up inside. It pissed me off even more. People were asking me, like, Kenneth, why are you training for cybersecurity? Don't you want to work here a little bit longer? I'm like, what? I'm like, are you guys high? I'm like, I'm not trying to stay here. And like, they didn't get it. I'm just like, I'm wasting my breath. And so, from like that perspective, like every day that I was there was preventing me from making and having the career that I wanted to have, right? So for me, the biggest thing was time, right? And that was my, I guess, biggest asset at the time. So just investing that, right? Even though it sucked, right? I'd be up like at 2 to 3 a.m. some days, right? Then go to school like at 7 a.m. again, do that 5 days in a row, then work on weekends. But it was completely worth it to be here. So I guess the moral of the story is just do the research, talk to people. And if the investment is worth it, then make that decision for yourself.
Yeah, and I think it's also very easy if you're not already in the space as somebody looking at cyber from the outside to get analysis like, oh my God, there's so much stuff. Oh my God, it's so like, what if I do the wrong thing? Or what if I don't know? And I don't even know where to start looking. And I think a lot of it can be really stressful to the point that you don't do anything at all. And that's also a mistake. If you know you don't want to be where you are, if you know you want to try something else, if it feels too big, right, to just throw your head in, and maybe that's not a good decision, right, to completely pivot, break it down smaller and smaller into a baby step so that you can at least have a conversation with someone, right? Kenneth is a friendly face. I try to be a friendly face. Talk to someone to see what the truth is, get more information, do an informational interview, read a blog, try a capture the flag. Wherever you are, like, what is that next step that can help answer, is that what you want or is that not what you want? And don't kind of, whenever you feel like, I want to do that, but oh my God, that's too much, I don't know what to do, just scale it down, scale it down, scale it down until it's something that you can actually do within that day or week. And then be self-aware enough to ask yourself after you finish that, was that the right direction? Do I need to adjust? Is there something else I should try? Maybe I love it. Let's go for a bigger investment next time. So I think too many people kind of stop themselves too early before they've answered any of the questions that they have.
Yeah, they might see an ad in TV, they don't do any research. They drop $10,000 on it and then it doesn't work. Like, this is a scam and they don't want to be in cybersecurity anymore, right?
There's a lot of like business and success coaching like that that promises you, if you do these three things, I'll tell you how to have reach nirvana in your life. But all that work, right? Doesn't matter who it is, you're gonna come to it from your own hard work. But some people just give you processes and guidelines to help you get there a little faster.
Yeah, I would definitely say that for sure.
Yeah.
But that was it for the questions. So now we'll move on towards the panel section. So for our audience, if you have any questions for me or Grace, feel free to type in the chat or come up and we'll answer them for you.
Yeah.
See Hazel's here and see Gavin's here as well.
See Hazel is here. Hi, Hazel.
Hello, how are you?
It's good to hear from you. It's been a while.
Yeah, it has.
So, Hazel, how has everything been with work and learning and security?
Well, everything's been good. I just hit a year at work like 2 weeks ago, and I've been learning more about Splunk, and I actually just gave a presentation about 3 weeks ago now at the Women in Cybersecurity Dallas meetup. I showed them a demo on how to install and configure Splunk in a Linux instance. And I was supposed to show them how to switch logs in Splunk as well, but we ran out of time. So I'm actually going to finish that up in 2 weeks at the next meetup. So that's giving me more time to practice my Splunk skills. And it was really interesting seeing how everyone was actually paying attention to me and they were actually learning from me. And it wasn't the other way around. So yeah, it was something new and it was fun.
Is it something you would do more of in the future?
I believe so. I was actually not as nervous as I thought I would be. So I feel like I actually enjoy teaching things or talking about things that I'm interested in.
I was there, Grace. I was very proud of her. I was taking pictures.
Awesome. Oh, you took pictures? I want to see
Yeah.
the pictures. I might have seen them online if they were posted. I guess, Hazel, a question for you too, because you were one of Kenneth's students and you landed a job and you've been there for a year now, which is wild. If you were to go back to the beginning, right, before you started the whole ACA journey, is there anything you would have changed? And then the second piece of that, is there anything that you would have been like, okay, Hazel, make sure you do more of this, or like make this is going to be the best thing ever, do this again, or make sure you do this?
I would honestly do the same thing all over again. I don't regret taking Kenneth's program because it's really helped me a lot, not just with my career, but with like personal growth and personal development. So I would definitely take up a program like this again if I were to start all over.
That's awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, it was worth the investment.
Yeah. Now, I know that we've chatted before online, but is there any questions that I can answer for you just about anything that I talked about today or about PulseDive or my career?
How was it for you transitioning from working for a company and then going to do your own work? How was that?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Some people are like, you crazy? Yes, the answer is yes. So before I joined on with PulseDive, I actually spent a couple weeks doing like blind research about. So PulseDive was very new at the time. It was kind of this like brand new to the block utility that does enrichment and has lookups, and I wasn't associated with it. So when I was invited to join the team, year one ish, basically, before the company was really like making serious revenue, I went out and I looked at a bunch of CTI people. I connected with all of them on LinkedIn and on Twitter, and I just talked to some people, and they didn't know me. They didn't know I was related to PulseDive or looking at it at all. And I was like asking about threat intelligence markets. I was asking about what their job was like, what their challenges were like. I was just doing user research basically. And then at the end, I was like, oh, well, what kind of tools do you use? Have you heard of PulseDive? And a few of them were like, oh yeah, PulseDive, it's a pretty neat, like it's a pretty cool tool. And so for me, hearing this validation from someone who knows, like doesn't have any biases talking to me about it, and knowing that they liked it and understanding that I enjoyed like talking to these people, I had a lot of respect for the discipline of threat intel, made me really want to do it. So sure, it was kind of scary leaving the nice, like somebody's paying most of your health insurance, somebody's going to be cutting you a paycheck, which is nice and consistent. But at the same time in my life, I had experienced enough of like side projects and wanting to do more and wanting to kind of be the one calling the shots, that it was a worthy pivot. It was a good experiment. And I also had been working long enough that I had a safety net. I had savings built up. I had a lifestyle where I knew how to like, cut costs, live very lean, and also not like be jeopardizing, right, my future financial health and success for that I took that risk. And I went from having a normal job where I had to commute into New York, which was 4 hours a day, which is wild. Yeah, 4 hours.
That's nasty.
Yeah,
Oh,
it was
wow.
terrible.
That's
To
more than me.
Yes, it was bad. I heard that you have a long commute. So it would be door to door. I'd take like 4 different modes of transportation to get into a full days of work where it was stressful, and then come home and be too tired to cook, too tired to clean, too tired to enjoy TV, too tired to do anything else. So for me, those first few months where I was free, I was able to learn, I was able to, go ham on just whatever projects that I thought were important and teach myself about the space and immerse myself. Even though some people struggle with that and they're like, I wake up and I don't know what to do. Oh, I gave myself so much to do. I gave myself too much to do. And that's kind of just how I operate as a person, where I'm always taking on projects, always helping out a Kenneth here and there, always, trying to bring on a mentee or work on an art project that like, I think that life comes naturally to me and I enjoy it. But it's always important to remember that like you're one person. You cannot get all the things on the to-do list. You cannot hit all the technical debt. You cannot be all the marketing things you want to be, and just choosing the things that matter and focusing on that and making sure that you're setting out these goals for yourself and looking at how close you are to hitting those goals and adjusting them based on new information. So the transition itself, it was only positive. I'll be honest, it was only positive, even though some people, 6 months in, have a kind of come to Jesus moment.
Oh,
Oh,
Grace,
well, that's awesome.
Sure.
Grace, we have a question in the chat from M.
Sure. Okay, let me take a look. So for the recording, it says, I'm transitioning from accounting and finance career. Have you ever heard of people with finance background pivoting into cyber? And then I'm looking at cybersecurity certifications as CompTIA per Scholas. I'm not familiar with that. With dual certs, I see pricing ranges vary for certs and courses. So how do you think one should invest into starting a cybersecurity career?
I can answer that as well, Grace.
Yeah, so I'll answer quickly with the first, and then Kenneth, I'll let you, I know you spend a lot of time looking at certifications and courses. And so the first one with people with finance background, absolutely. Guess who has the most financial or the biggest budgets for cybersecurity? Banks do. And they also have fraud research, a lot of cyber analysts, they have fusion centers, they have security operations centers. So definitely, I don't know exactly what you've done, but if you're a business analyst, if you're good with spreadsheets, that means you're going to be good at any sort of analysis and threat research, or it'll help you. And if you've done anything related to credit card fraud or research or transactions, if you've done anything in like crypto, that's also really interesting, like blockchain, that also can be like a value add on your career resume even before you touch cyber. Of course, you'll have to learn about the cyber stuff, and I'll pass that off to Kenneth, but definitely a lot of people coming from business and finance backgrounds have very clear transition paths into cybersecurity related roles at either finance companies or within finance related kind of cyber roles. All right, Kenneth, off to you for number two.
Okay. Yeah, actually, we have, I believe, 3 of our current students have a finance background that we're working with right now. They're all doing really well. That is a pretty common transition period for that as well, especially for us. So it definitely is possible. From the certification perspective, it's going to depend on how much tech or cybersecurity experience you have. Normally, what we tell our students is the cert in of itself isn't that important. Honestly, in my opinion, it's right to know what you get from it, right? Because if I interview you and you say, I have GCP, AWS, and Azure, and ask you basic questions about cloud, and you don't know what you're doing, right? Then I'm like, all right, since she doesn't really like know what she's doing. So the knowledge gained from that is the most important part, right? And then being able to apply and speak towards that is super important. So there's a couple foundational certs you can get just for general cybersecurity, like the Blue Team one, Security Plus, name a few. For our Pacific students, they normally get specialized in different similar sort ones. So that may be SentinelOne. We've got a partnership deal with them as a reseller. It may be Splunk Core, Splunk Power User, because a lot of my clients are big banks, and they require you to have the 2 certifications to get access towards their systems. So if you're able to have that from the get-go before they hire you, that saves them a lot of time and a lot of money for that. And then like maybe Palo Alto for a SOAR one. How much should you invest? That depends on what your budget is, right? If you already, I know, Emma, I think we talked in the past before. I think you already have a bachelor's degree. So I would probably tell you not to get a master's degree in cybersecurity. I don't think it's necessary. So try to look at a program that's within your budget and that suits your needs, what you're trying to do. I can send you a message over LinkedIn. I can get you booked on a call if you want to do that. Just let me know and we can go from there. But I would definitely say if you have a finance or business degree or background, it's definitely possible for you to transition to cybersecurity. Does anybody else have any questions for me or Grace?
Ask us anything.
Yes, Grace is amazing. So answer all the questions.
I was once in a while, I've thought like, should I do an ask me anything? And I was like, that could go terribly wrong.
Yeah.
I might not do that.
Why would it go wrong?
Oh, well, if I were to put it on something like Reddit, I would say that when you're with like typical audiences in like our user community, it's good. But if you leave it open to like anyone who might want to troll or may not have the best intent, then it could go haywire. So I've thought about it, but I've scaled back and decided not to and leave it up to webinars like this with Kenneth instead.